I still remember the day it all began. The phone call came early in the morning, the kind of call that you don't expect, the kind that changes the way you look at people and the world around you. A polite but firm voice on the other end introduced themselves as a representative from the property management company. They told me that my lease was being reviewed and there was a possibility that it would be canceled. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. I paid my rent on time. I followed all the building rules and I had never once caused a problem. So why on earth would they want to cancel my lease? As the call ended, I sat there in silence, staring at the walls around me. The apartment wasn't just a place to stay, it was part of my identity. Every corner of that space held memories, from the nights I worked late building my dream, to the quiet mornings where I sipped coffee and planned my future. And yet, here I was, being told that my place in it might no longer exist. A deep frustration started building inside me. How could they do this? And more importantly, why? I decided not to panic. Instead, I started digging. I reviewed my lease agreement line by line, looking for loopholes or hidden clauses they might try to use against me. I found nothing that justified what they claimed. My lease was valid and I was in good standing. But the more I looked, the more suspicious it all felt. It wasn't just about a lease cancellation. Something deeper was at play. Days passed, and I began noticing subtle changes. Neighbors whispered in the hallways, management staff avoided. Eye contact and letters with vague warnings about policy changes started slipping under my door. It was clear that this wasn't a random mistake. It was a targeted effort. They wanted me out. The question was, why me? The irony of the whole situation was almost laughable. What they didn't know, what they could not even imagine, was that I wasn't just another tenant. I wasn't someone barely holding on to a rental contract, hoping the landlord would let me stay. No. The truth was far bigger than that. The building they were trying to push me out of, the very foundation beneath my feet, was mine. I owned it, but revealing that too soon would ruin everything. So I kept quiet. I let them play their game. I listened carefully to their threats and their so-called notices, each one more desperate than the last. They thought they were pushing me into a corner. What they didn't realize was that I was giving them rope, and they were already tying the knot themselves. The hook was tightening. Each day brought new developments, each one more dramatic than the last. A notice pinned to my door with bold red letters warned me of imminent termination. A meeting invitation from the building manager arrived with cold formality, instructing me to appear and discuss the matter of your continued occupancy. It was as though they were staging a theatrical performance, one designed to intimidate me into submission. But I didn't bend. Instead, I observed. I smiled politely, nodded, in agreement during their warnings, and played the role of the nervous tenant they believed me to be. Inside, though, my confidence grew with every passing day. They had no idea that the stage they were performing on was built on my foundation. The meeting was where things took a dramatic turn. I sat across from the building manager, who was flanked by two stern-faced assistants. They spoke in careful, rehearsed tones, explaining that my lease would soon be canceled due to restructuring of property usage. It sounded professional, but I could see through the cracks. They were desperate. They wanted me gone, but they couldn't give me a real reason. I leaned back in my chair, letting them finish their speech. For a moment, I allowed silence to stretch across the room. Then I simply asked, "Do you know who owns this building?" Their expressions shifted, but only slightly. They weren't prepared for that question. They dodged it, talking about policies and agreements. But I could see the nervous flicker in their eyes. They suspected, but weren't sure. I didn't give them the full answer. Not yet. Timing was everything. Instead, I smiled, stood up, and told them that I would review the matter further. They thought they had me. They thought the performance had worked. Little did they know, the story was only beginning. Walking out of that office, I could feel the power shift. They believed they were tightening their grip, but in reality, their control was slipping away. My ownership of the building wasn't. Just a technicality. It was the ace in my pocket, the hidden card that would flip the entire game upside down. And when I played it, their empire of intimidation would crumble. For the next few weeks, I let the pressure build. More notices, more warnings, even a final letter threatening legal action. Each piece of paper they sent was another nail in the coffin of their credibility. I kept every single document, filed neatly, waiting for the moment to reveal the truth. The more they pushed, the more evidence I collected. The most powerful part of this story wasn't the ownership itself. It was the patience. The ability to stay calm while they panicked, to stay silent while they shouted, to stay composed while they trembled under their own lies. They wanted to scare me into leaving, but the reality was that they were digging their own downfall, brick by brick, word by word. I remember one particular evening when I received yet another notice. This one claimed that I had violated occupancy terms by subletting without permission. It was completely false. I laughed out loud holding that paper in my hands because I knew exactly what was happening. They were running out of ideas. Their story was unraveling, and soon the world would see who truly held the power. That night, as I stood by the window of my apartment, watching the city lights glow against the dark sky, I felt something shift within me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up to bullies, about exposing corruption, and about showing that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one holding the biggest card. They thought they were canceling my lease, but the truth? I owned the building, and soon they would find out in a way they'd never forget. The funny thing about life is that people often underestimate you when they think they've got you cornered, and that's exactly what happened with my tenants. They thought I was just some average landlord, probably sitting at home waiting for their rent check like clockwork. They didn't realize I was the kind of person who had worked hard, saved, invested, and learned the ins and outs of property management from the ground up. They didn't realize that this wasn't just a building to me. It was the result of years of sweat, sacrifice, and late nights figuring out how to make money work for me instead of the other way around. So when they tried to cancel my lease, they had no clue who they were really dealing with. Now, let me take you to the day things truly shifted. After weeks of hearing whispers, after ignoring their little games, after politely dodging their tricks, I finally decided it was time to put my cards on the table. I walked into that building, calm as ever, while they all sat there waiting, thinking this was going to be the meeting where they backed me into a corner. You could feel the tension in the air, the kind where people are convinced they're in control, but deep down there's just a hint of doubt they can't quite shake. One of them started right away, talking about how the lease terms were unfair, how the agreement wasn't valid anymore, and how they had decided collectively that I needed to leave. Collectively. As if tenants could just band together and rewrite the rules because it suited them. I didn't interrupt, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't even smile. I just let them keep digging themselves deeper and deeper into their own assumptions. And then, when they finished their little speech, I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Inside that folder was every single legal document that mattered, the property deed, the original ownership transfer papers, and of course, their signed leases. I laid them out on the table one by one, slow and deliberate, like I was dealing cards in the highest stakes poker game of my life. The room went quiet. You could hear the air conditioning hum louder than their voices because suddenly they didn't know what to say. The person who had been the most vocal looked down, shifted in their chair, and tried to come up with a new excuse. Well, even if you own it, we think the conditions aren't fair. That's when I leaned forward just slightly and said the line I had been waiting to say for weeks. You can't cancel my lease because I own the building. Their jaws practically hit the floor. The confidence drained out of the room like someone had pulled the plug. In that moment, everything flipped. The power they thought they had evaporated, and the reality of the situation hit them all at once. They weren't negotiating with some random property manager. They weren't dealing with someone who could be pushed around with empty threats. They were sitting across from the owner, the person with the ultimate say, the final word, the one holding all the keys, literally and legally. Now here's the thing about power. It's not always about shouting the loudest or making the boldest moves. Sometimes, real power comes from patience, from letting the other side reveal themselves, from letting them believe they've got the upper hand until the exact right moment to reveal the truth. And that day, I didn't just win back control of my building, I reminded myself why I had fought so hard to own it in the first place. But this story isn't just about me. It's about anyone who's ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or pushed around by people who didn't know your real strength. Because here's the truth. When you've built something for yourself, when you've worked for it, sacrificed for it, and claimed it as yours, nobody can just waltz in and take it away. They might try, they might scheme, they might talk a big game. But at the end of the day, the foundation you've built will always outlast their noise. And maybe that's why this whole experience left me with a strange sense of gratitude. As frustrating as it was, as ridiculous as their attempts were, it reminded me of the importance of standing firm, of knowing your worth, and of never letting someone else dictate your reality when you've worked too hard to create it yourself. So, here's my message to you. Whether it's in business, in life, or in your personal relationships, don't let people trick you into thinking they have the power when you know you're the one holding the cards. Sometimes the best response isn't anger or frustration. It's patience, preparation, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing the truth. And let me tell you, that truth hits harder than any argument ever could. Because at the end of the day, when the dust settled and the room grew quiet, there was nothing left for them to do but accept reality. They couldn't cancel me. They couldn't cancel my lease. Because I own the building. And the best part? Walking out of that meeting, watching their faces, realizing they had just learned a lesson they wouldn't forget anytime soon. That's the moment I knew this wasn't just about property or contracts or money. This was about respect. Respect that you earn, respect that you demand, and respect that, once established, nobody can take away from you. So the next time someone tries to corner you, to underestimate you, or to play games with your future, remember this story. Remember that calm can be more powerful than chaos, that truth will always outshine lies, and that if you've built your foundation strong enough, no storm, no scheme, no group of people with their empty threats can knock it down. Because sometimes, the greatest victory isn't in fighting. It's in simply standing, smiling, and reminding them of one simple fact. You already own the building. I didn't sleep that night. The words lease termination kept echoing in my head, and the more I thought about it, the more absurd it felt. How could they cancel something that didn't even exist anymore? The next morning, I made myself a strong cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and pulled out every file I had on that building. Purchase agreements, title deeds, utility bills, tax statements. I wanted to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. And sure enough, it was all there in black and white. My name, my signature, the county seal. I owned this property, free and clear. That gave me some comfort, but it didn't erase the unease. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just a clerical error. This was intentional. Someone, somewhere, was pulling strings, trying to scare me, trying to make me doubt what I knew was real. And that was when I started asking myself the bigger questions. Why now? Why me? And what exactly did they stand to gain from this? Later, that day I got a call from one of the tenants. She sounded rattled. She told me a man had come by, dressed like some official, claiming the entire building was under review for compliance issues. He even handed out papers that looked official, full of fine print and threatening language. She asked me if we were going to lose our homes. That moment hit me hard. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone under this roof. People had families, jobs, lives built around this place. If I didn't stand my ground, they would all pay the price. So I decided it was time to stop reacting and start acting. I went down to the city offices, documents in hand, and asked for answers. The clerk at the desk barely looked up when I explained the situation, just pointed me toward another line. After an hour of waiting, another official finally listened. To me, brows furrowed as I laid everything out. And do you know what he said? He leaned in, lowered his voice, and whispered, "This happens more often than you think." That sent a chill down my spine. More often than you think? What was that supposed to mean? I pressed him for details, but he wouldn't say more. Just advised me to get a good lawyer. That was when I realized the system wasn't going to protect me. If anything, it was probably in on it. These fake notices, these shady visits, the whispers about compliance, it all felt coordinated. And if I was going to win, I'd have to fight on my own terms. Here's where the hook really comes in, because just when I thought I had things figured out, they escalated. One evening, I came home to find a bright orange notice plastered across the front door. In bold letters, it declared the property condemned. Can you imagine the panic that caused? Tenants were calling me left and right, bags half packed, children crying, asking where they were supposed to go. My blood boiled. How dare they? I tore the notice down and studied it, and sure enough, it was a fake. The seal didn't match the city's. The wording was off, sloppy even. Whoever did this thought they could get away with scare tactics, but what they didn't count on was that I wasn't just a landlord. I was a power grid engineer. That means I'm trained to look at systems, to see connections others miss, to dig until the root cause is exposed. So I started digging. Late nights turned into early mornings as I traced paper trails, phone numbers, and signatures. And the deeper I went, the more shocking it became. There were real estate developers eyeing this neighborhood, circling like vultures. They wanted the land cheap. They wanted the tenants gone, and I was standing in their way. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, why not just ignore them? After all, I had the deed. They couldn't legally take the building from me, right? But that's the dangerous part. It wasn't about what they could do legally. It was about pressure, about fear, about making life so unbearable that tenants would leave, making me so exhausted I might sell. That was their strategy. And unless I fought back, it just might work. The next week was chaos. Anonymous calls at all hours. Fake utility shutoff notices. Even a man showing up pretending to be an inspector, demanding access to the electrical room. That was the last straw. I knew then that this was no ordinary dispute. This was war. I gathered the tenants for a meeting in the lobby. I laid out the facts, showed them the documents, explained what was happening. At first, they were nervous, even skeptical. But as I spoke, something shifted. They saw I wasn't backing down. They realized they weren't powerless pawns in this game. Together, we could fight back. That meeting became a turning point. Suddenly, it wasn't just me versus them. It was all of us, united, refusing to be pushed out. We set up a watch schedule, making sure strangers couldn't sneak in. We reported every suspicious activity, documented every fake notice, kept detailed records. We turned the building into a fortress of truth. And here's the part that still gives me goosebumps. Because as we stood together, refusing to budge, the enemy started to crack. Their tactics grew sloppier, their threats more desperate. And that's when I knew we were getting close to exposing them, but I wasn't prepared for what came next. One night, around midnight, I heard a loud banging at the door. When I opened it, there were two men in suits, holding clipboards, flashing badges that didn't quite look right. They demanded entry, claiming they had orders from above. I stood my ground, blocking the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest, and I told them calmly but firmly, "I own this building. You have no authority here. Now leave before I call the police." For a moment, they hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. Then, without another word, they turned and walked away into the night. It was a small victory, but it proved something important. Bullies back down when you refuse to play their game. Still, I knew this wasn't over. They wouldn't give up that easily. The question was, how far were they willing to go? And more importantly, how far was I willing to go to protect my home, my tenants, my building?